The 1910s were an extension of the automotive revolution that started in the first decade of the 20th century. This is a decade of massive expansion of the automotive industry and a definite end of horse-pulled carriages, at least in urban areas. Besides further improvements in terms of car performance, comfort, and quality, this decade also brought significantly shorter production times, as companies like Ford became able to produce a chassis in no more than a couple of hours, which is something that used to take a day or two just a few years earlier. Furthermore, this was a decade of a massive appearance of showrooms, which started popping out everywhere. Of course, this decade also brought a couple of legendary models that cemented their place in automotive history. Stay with us as we take a brief insight into some of the most iconic cars from the 1910s. Number 10, Chevrolet Series C. This is the first car Chevrolet ever made, and it represents the very beginning of the rivalry with Ford, which would soon after become legendary. Back in the day, Ford was already an established car maker with several models on offer, including the legendary Model T. So, Louis Chevrolet wanted to enter the market with something more upscale, something that would resemble European cars of the time. Indeed, the Series C was way more upscale than the Model T, with a massive inline-six engine that was good enough for about 40 horsepower, which was enough for a top speed of 65 miles per hour, which was comparable with the top players on the market at the time. Moreover, this car featured quite advanced rear-mounted 3-speed transmission with a cone clutch. The list of standard equipment also included goodies like a starter, 4 doors, a folding top, a toolbox, cowl lights, and electric headlights. Number 9, Rolls-Royce Silver Ghost. Although it was introduced in 1906, the Silver Ghost was in production for more than 2 decades, and the 1910s were definitely its best years, with record sales in 1913, when 742 units were sold. This year was important for another reason, because the company did some significant upgrades by extending the wheelbase by 8 inches and replacing the 3-speed transmission with a new 4-speed unit. Moreover, this update also brought new drum brakes, which were no longer operated by hand lever, but rather a foot pedal. But the importance of Silver Ghost goes way beyond these upgrades and technical solutions. This was the model that established Rolls-Royce as one of the most prestigious car makers in the world. Between 1906 and 1926, a total of 7,874 Silver Ghost cars were produced, and many of them still run today, while several examples are part of the most renowned car museums around the world. Number 8, Cadillac Model 30. Cadillac's early days were pretty exciting because this company is responsible for numerous first-ever things in the automotive industry, and the Model 30 is a great example. Namely, this model, which was introduced in 1909, was the first model in the world to feature an electric starter. To remind you, back in the day, a hand crank or spring was used to start the car. Moreover, this was also the first US car to come with a fully closed body. In terms of technical specifications, the earlier versions relied heavily on the Model G, and that included the engine too. The original model features the same Model G's 4-cylinder engine with 3.7 liters in displacement and sliding gear transmission. The second production year brought a larger displacement, 4.2 liters, while a complete engine redesign was done in 1913 when it came with a notably longer stroke that increased displacement to 6 liters. Eventually, the replacement came in 1914 with the iconic Type 51, the company's first V8 engine. Number 7, Mercer Type 35R Raceabout. Although it was active for just a little bit over 16 years, this American car maker left a big mark in automotive history, and the Type 35 Raceabout was its most iconic model. Introduced in 1911, the Type 35R came as a 2-seater designed for high speeds with performance in mind. The car was equipped with a 4.8-liter inline-4 engine with a max output of 55 horsepower, and it was able to achieve a top speed of over 90 miles per hour. The Mercer Type 35R Raceabout gained its legendary status the same year it was introduced, when it won 5 of 6 races it participated, losing only in its first race. In the following years, The Type 35R broke the average speed record several times. Besides great success in motorsport, this car is also known for the incident that happened in 1914, when two Raceabouts collided and the champion Spencer Wishart was killed, along with his mechanic John Genter. This was probably the main reason for the later cancellation of the company's racing program. Number 6. Rolls-Royce Alpine Eagle. In 1912, James Radley took part in the prestigious Austrian Alpine trial, and soon after he found out that the standard Silver Ghost was inadequate for this kind of racing. Therefore, Rolls-Royce formed a factory team that would prepare 4 cars for the next year's event, which represents one of the first examples of tuning regular models and turning them into competition cars. These 4 models were called Alpine Eagles, and they came with a couple of significant upgrades over standard versions, starting from a 4-speed transmission. The engine was also upgraded with an increased compression ratio and a larger carburetor, which resulted in a max output of 75 horsepower, 15 more than the standard version. Eventually, the team won 6 awards, including the Archduke Leopold Cup. Soon after, the company started selling replicas under the Continental name, but history rather remembers them as Alpine Eagles, a moniker given by the test driver Ernest Hives. Number 5. Packard Twin 6. Back in the day, Packard was already an established luxury car maker, and with the growing popularity of rival companies, it was time to offer something different, to elevate to the next level in terms of luxury. And the choice was quite radical but logical at the same time, to offer an engine that would be more capable, smoother, and more refined. Jesse Vincent, Packard's chief engineer, took a classic inline-6 engine design and doubled it, creating a mighty V12 engine, which was not just smoother and more capable than Cadillac's V8, it was also much easier to work with. As a result, the engine was rated at 85 horsepower at 3,000 revolutions per minute. But the key thing about this 424 cubic inch unit was refinement, because this was by far the smoothest and quietest engine back in the day. The Twin 6 had a surprisingly long run, with production that lasted for nearly 8 years between 1916 and 1923. Number 4. Stutz Bearcat. It may have been out of business for nearly 85 years, but this car company will never be forgotten, and the Bearcat is one of the key reasons. And how could it be forgotten when it won 25 of the 30 races it entered only in 1912? The Bearcat was light and powerful, with exceptional handling, and that made it one of the most prestigious American cars back in the day, with a starting price that was 4 times higher compared to the Model T. Soon after, the company added a 6-cylinder engine option, as well as a couple more upgrades, including an electric starter. In the following years, the company continued to upgrade this model, including an enclosed cockpit with step-over sides, as well as a completely new 5.9-liter 4-cylinder engine. The model was in production until 1924 and then revived again in 1931, but that later version never gained the fame of the original. Number 3. Pierce Arrow 66. The Pierce Arrow 66 is definitely one of the greatest American cars of this era, primarily known for its monstrous 825 cubic inch engine, which remained one of the largest ever made in history. The model was originally introduced in 1910, and, as mentioned, it features a massive inline-6. But the whole car was huge, with a wheelbase that goes all the way up to 140 inches and a curb weight of 4,000 pounds. The initial engine output was around 125 to 130 horsepower, but the company did a big upgrade in 1918 when the engine received a new cylinder head with 4 valves per cylinder, which increased the maximum output even more. However, the production ended the same year. Number 2. Mercedes 115 HP Grand Prix. Introduced in 1914, this model was a big comeback for Mercedes when it came to Grand Prix racing. Once again, Mercedes engineers showed their knowledge and skill, making a superior engine with a relatively simple design when compared to competition, with a 4.5-liter unit that was capable of making 115 horsepower. The rest of the car was rather conventional, which provided a perfect balance between performance and reliability. For example, it featured only one camshaft and didn't have front brakes. But the potent engine and light chassis combined with reliability, ensured dominance in the French Grand Prix in Lyon. After that, the car was delivered to England for a display, and unfortunately, World War I started. The car ended up in the Rolls-Royce factory for studying, where it had a major impact on future generations of Rolls-Royce models, especially the famous Hawk engine. Number 1. Ford Model T. If you watched our previous video about the most iconic cars of the 1900s, you probably remember that the Model T was in first place in that video as well. Technically, the car was introduced in the first decade of the 20th century, but the peak was actually in the next decade when this model gained global fame. The impact of the Model T is so huge, even from today's perspective, that it would be unfair to leave it out just because it was already on the previous list. This is one of the all-time icons and certainly one of the most important cars ever made, a car that motorized the whole world. What do you think about our list? Did we miss something? Do you agree with the order we made? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.